We ready, everybody?
We're ready.
Okay. We're good.
We're
Good
good.
morning. Hope everybody's doing well. First day of spring. We are at day, let's see what day we're on, legislative session. I think we're at like day 72, day 71 of what is supposed to be 105 days. Recall that we're supposed to end April 23rd. We are almost to the deadline for bills to come out of the committee in the opposite house. And I have good news for you. It appears that your emails and whatever else you've been doing is working. We've got a hearing on House Bill 1513. It is Wednesday at 8 a.m. In the Senate State Government Committee, so you could potentially watch live if you wanted to see that hearing go on. I'm anticipating that you'll want me to testify again in favor of that bill. And I think it would be helpful for me if we could look at the talking points you made before and see if there's any refinements you want to make to some of those points, especially given that this bill has a couple other provisions in it, including the Temperance Day and a couple other opportunities for registration. It's not just simply pre-registration at driver's licenses. So it would be helpful for you guys to take a few minutes if you can in the next day and identify a few other points that you want me to make in testimony in that bill. Remember, the Senate State Government Committee is a very small committee. It only has 5 people on it, and Senator Malosha is not inclined to be supportive of this bill, and he's the chair. Now, your pressure, our pressure, I've been working with the folks that met with us at lunch when you were down here, the Voting Justice Coalition and those others, have all been putting a lot of pressure on Senator Malosha to hear the bill and hopefully move it. But testimony is going to be very important to make it compelling to him. The other members of the committee, at least 3 of them I know are supporters of this concept. So that's all we need is a majority, but we do need it to be brought up for a vote after the hearing. The deadline for that to happen is next Wednesday, March 29th. So sometime between this Wednesday and next Wednesday, that bill needs to be brought up for a vote in the Senate State Government Committee in order for it to keep moving along. A couple other just notes about legislative session. We expect the Senate to release their proposed budget, operating budget, and capital budget for the state sometime this week, probably tomorrow. And if you'll remember, the governor, right before session, he puts out his proposed budget. So he says, these are the things I think we ought to spend money on and how we ought to spend it. And then the Senate this year puts out their proposal, which would be very different from the governor's. And then next week, we're expecting the House to put out their budget proposal. After all 3 budgets are out, then that's when they start spending a lot of time negotiating behind closed doors. It's a really boring time of session for me anyway, because they spend most of their time behind closed doors trying to figure out how to reach a budget. We don't expect them to reach agreement by April 23rd. And so we'll probably be going into special sessions into May and maybe even into June. So that's pretty much what's going on right now. First of all, any questions on where we are in session or any of that kind of stuff? Or questions on our bill, questions on strategy? Yep, I see in the middle.
So it said that 283 bills have passed both the Senate and the House. Now what are the next steps for those bills?
Right, so, okay, so you guys read my report, good. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So going back to that, we normally see around 3,000 to 4,000 bills introduced during a session. This year, much lower. I mean, it was about 2,600 total, and an even smaller volume of bills that actually passed over between the 2 houses. So the next steps for all those bills, just like our 1513, is that they have to have hearings in the opposite house, and then they have to go through the exact same process. They have to go through the committee, then maybe the transportation committee or the fiscal committee, and rules on the floor for a vote. And here's a really important piece to know. Let's use our bill as example. If 1513 is changed in any way, even a comma is changed on 1513 in the Senate and is passed by the Senate, that change has to go back to the House for what's called concurrence. In other words, the identical words have to be voted on by both the House and the Senate in order for it to go to the governor. Now, if 1513 is not changed at all, if it stays exactly as it is and it's passed out of the Senate, then it would go directly to the governor. And then if there's no concurrence, so this gets a little goofy, but let's say Senator Milosha's committee changes 1513. Let's say they change it to take out 16-year-olds and they only say 17-year-olds, right? So that goes back to the House for concurrence. The House, either it's an up or down vote, either yay or nay. We concur or we don't concur. If they don't concur and they insist on their position, then it goes back over to the Senate, and the Senate has to decide whether to back off of their changes or insist on their changes. If they insist on their changes, then the bill goes to what's called a conference committee. And that is when a few members of the House and a few members of the Senate are appointed to a small committee who then negotiate the final bill. If a bill ends up in conference committee, it's a lot easier for it to die because at this point it gets complicated after it goes kind of like a volleyball going back and forth. So that all of these bills that have now passed from their original House to the opposite House, any of that could happen to them. Could just go right to the governor, or they could get caught in that volley back and forth between the houses. In the front, I think there was a question in the front.
Oh, yeah. For 1315, do we have, is that going to cost a lot of money, or is there a budget proposed for that?
Let's look at this, see if there's a fiscal note. So one thing you can do when you look at a bill, remember we looked on the legislative website and there is a fiscal note. So when you look at the ledge website and you look at the bill and it shows you the history, it shows, you can click on the fiscal note. Fiscal note is what the government says it's going to cost them to run the program. In this case, and I'll email this to you guys, but in this case, the cost for this coming biennium, that means 2017 to 2019, is $318,000. 236 of that is for the Department of Licensing, 70,000 for the Secretary of State, and 12,000 for the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. So that's 3 agencies that will have costs, or they estimate they will have those costs in implementing the program. And you can read, when I send this to you, you can read the fiscal note, and there's a narrative in there that explains what those costs are. So the bill will have to go to either transportation or Ways and Means after state government if it's passed out of there. Any bill that has a financial impact to the state more than 50,000, whether that's 50,000 in savings or 50,000 in cost, has to go to the fiscal committee, either transportation or Ways and Means. Good questions? I see one right in the back.
Okay. So the Senate and the House, they can, or the Senate, they can change the bill. But when it's sent to the governor and he's reviewing the bill, is there a situation when he can make a change to it?
That's a really good question. Yes, he cannot rewrite anything. He can't amend it in any way, but the governor has what's called section veto power. So if you look at our bill, we've got, let's see, let me pull up the bill real quick here. My Wi-Fi's kind of slow. So you know how it says new section 1 or section 2, RCW are each amended to read as follows, how we read that before. The governor in Washington State can eliminate a section out of a bill. So he can take his red pen and cross that section out. That's very different than the powers that the President of the United States has. The President of the United States can eliminate a single line. That is called a line item veto. He can just go in and write and cross out one line in a section, but the governor of the state has to delete an entire section. So he can't go in and change a word shall to shall not or things like that. But he can delete sections out of the bill. It's called section veto power. Yep.
So to make sure that you didn't have the governor deleting your sections, would you go to him before it got voted on and just like make sure that he was okay with it all?
Exactly, and that'll be one of the steps that we'll talk about. The governor has staff that work for him in every single subject area, just like the committees. And so there is a staff member that the governor has that's assigned to elections and voting and education. And so we will, as soon as we figure out if we're able to get the senator to move this bill, that'll be one of the next steps that we would take, is working with the governor's office to make sure that he's comfortable with the bill and that when it comes to him, that he will sign it. Absolutely. Usually the governor, if it's passed with a good majority of, there's politics, of members of both parties and or most of his political party, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, they'll usually sign the bill. But there are cases where there are things the governor just doesn't like and wants to change about it. So you definitely need to lobby every single step of the process. I'm curious, has anybody got any responses from your emails to legislators about the bill?
No, that is one of the things that discouraged people.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Wait,
And I
wait,
have one.
yeah,
Yeah.
back there in the back. You. Tell Vicky about your course.
Yeah.
Yes, if people got any response to their emails.
Billings about
Louder.
not voting for, where the hell it was, forget. And the argument was that it was immoral because it was a government bill. And since government is moral as an institution, you should.
Which bill are we talking about?
I think
Is it-
1530.
5110.
Was it 5110?
Yeah,
The
5110.
youth voter registration.
Yeah,
And who was it you talked to?
Billing.
Bill,
Yeah,
Billy? He's supportive of the bill.
yeah,
That's weird.
he opposed to it.
he's and I was opposed to the bill. He and Billy got into a philosophical discussion
Oh, I see.
of government and their
Okay.
morality.
Oh, well, good. There you go.
And he got a pretty extensive response.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I am surprised you haven't gotten more, although I'm not surprised that Senator Milosha has not been answering you guys because, again, he doesn't like the bill. So he's sort of, remember how, was anybody in this class with us when we tried to talk to him by the Senate doors? Yeah, remember how he was trying to get away from us the whole time? He doesn't really want to talk to you guys because he doesn't really like the bill, but that's exactly what we do is, try to make him talk about it. So I'm not surprised that he's not answering you. I am a little surprised that Senator Hunt's not answering, although he's pretty busy too, but he's very supportive. I think that the votes that are possible for us here is Senator Cooterer. Actually, that's what we should do next is Senator Zeiger, Senator Hunt, and Senator Cooterer are really our targets here in getting support for this. Zeiger, because he's the vice chair, he's second in charge in that committee, he can also push Senator Milosha to move the bill. So once the hearing is over, then what I would like you to do is focus on those three folks. So Senator Zeiger's from Puyallup area, Senator Hunt's from here in Olympia, and I think some of you met with Senator Hunt. Well, actually, we met with both Zeiger and Hunt when you were down here. And then Senator Cooterer, I can never say her name right, is from the Bellevue area. And so once the hearing happens, then the next thing we need to do is really push on those three to urge Senator Milosha to bring the bill up for a vote. How are we doing on time? We're almost out of time, right?
Yeah, 9:31.
Okay, any last questions before that? You guys gonna watch the testimony?
Well, what about Senator Pearson?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely worth contacting. I think what I'm saying is I think the most likely people that will vote for this bill will support it would be those three. So you should contact everybody, but our targets are trying to get at least those three to be pushing it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Should we bother again with Milosha or kind of?
Yeah, don't let it up.
All right, even though
You know?
people are discouraged, we'll just.
Well, you know what? Here's what I would say. If I got discouraged every time I was told no in my job, I would not be doing this job anymore. I can't tell you how many times I'm told no, or I'm avoided. I mean, I'll tell you guys, sometimes I'm walking down the hall and a legislator who knows I want to talk to them about something will turn and walk the other way, to kind of run away from me. So it's just the way it is. The way, you know, you've ever heard the term squeaky wheel gets the grease? So you gotta keep pushing on it, even if it's frustrating, even if people aren't listening to you. The only way you keep it in front of them and keep it going is to keep pushing on it. If you just give up, then they go, all right, fine, well, they don't care. So then I don't have to worry about it. So don't get discouraged. That's part of the whole process.
Okay, any other questions?
Send me any other points you want to make sure that I make when I testify on Wednesday.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Vicky.
All right, thanks, guys.